start sending those in, and I'm going to turn things over to Christy.
Great. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here with you today. I understand that we're all in the state of Georgia operating under school closures, and Brian and Jade and I from Focus and Fragile Kids decided let's talk about what special education should look like during school closures. So as Brian said, my name is Christy Calbos, and I am an attorney with the Calbos Law Firm. I own the firm, and I am representing children with disabilities throughout the state of Georgia. The main thing that I focus on is helping make sure that children have good IEPs and 504 plans. So if you are a parent in Georgia with a child in public schools, I assist you by reviewing education records and, consulting with you. You can find out more about me on my law firm website page, calboslaw.com. So basically what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about what it looks like to have an emergency situation with your schooling being delivered either through high-tech or low-tech channels while we're undergoing a school closure. What I'm going to be talking about today, though, is not specific legal advice. Obviously, if you feel like you need to consult with an attorney, please feel free to reach out to me. This is just general informational purposes, and as we go through, we'll talk more about how very specific each situation should look. Want to go over 6 quick fundamental ideas that are going to be foundational for what we talk about today. The first is that IEPs are flexible. IEPs can be changed frequently. The second is they are built on what your child needs to learn. And we have IEP goals that focus on those deficit areas. Those have to be properly measured. IEPs should be individualized. And IEP services are never determined by what happens to be available or what fits with schedules and availability. However, an emergency like this can change things up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today. Final thing is that IEPs are like legal contracts. When they're not implemented, which basically means when they're not followed, legal rights may be in jeopardy, all right? And again, when there's an emergency, the school system has to do the best that it can under the circumstances. So the idea that your child should continue to receive an appropriate education still remains in place, but what the law says and what the United States Department of Education has said is that we're going to do this to the most appropriate extent possible, given our limitations that we're sheltering in place, that people can't come to your home, that we can't go to buildings or clinics. We're going to do what we can, and as I'll explain later today, anything that your child misses will be considered when we return to our school buildings, and those services will be made up. So if your child's missing therapies or the instruction at home is not clicking, don't worry. We're going to make those services up when we get back into the school building. So this is just a blip on the radar. All right, so let's start with the very first question that I have for you is you need to divide yourself into one of 2 categories based on what is your school providing. Option A is you are closed completely. There are no educational services provided. Are you just receiving optional activities? Now, if you don't know the answer to this, you probably would want to email your school's teacher or special ed director, because a lot of parents are confused. They're saying, well, Christy, I'm getting links, I'm getting materials, but I'm not sure, is it required or optional? Okay, so option A is that your school district is closed completely. There's no educational services being provided, but you're getting a lot of optional activities, busy work. Here are, voluntary things that you can do with your child. The other option is school is happening and your child is supposed to participate. And that could look like virtually or through hard copies of work or a combination of both. So the first thing you want to do is you should clarify by writing to the school and saying, is this optional or is this mandatory? Are we doing distance learning? Distance learning is obviously any type of learning. It doesn't refer to virtual learning. But are we doing distance learning, and is attendance being taken? And is the work being counted for a grade or for participation? Or are these just voluntary activities? So once you know whether you're closed completely or school is happening, then what we're going to talk about will be applicable to you in one of those two categories. Okay. If school is canceled for everybody in your district, and you've clarified that, what that means is that special education IEP services are not required. If all general education students are not receiving instruction, and again, remember, there's a difference between the school offering you helpful ideas to keep your child afloat versus the school says, we're teaching, here's the links, here's when you log on, here's when the teacher is available to support you or actually teach the class. The therapist, your speech language therapist, your occupational therapist, they are actually, if your school is canceled for all, they might give you busy work or helpful work, but they are not providing the therapies. Okay. Now, with this being said, let me just tell you that the first part of March was confusing. So it's now April 1st. Most schools went into closure around the second week of March. The first 10 days of any school closure are considered a short-term closure, not long-term. So when schools really started to kick into high gear was when, and you have to look at your calendar and look at the date that your school system actually passed day 10. Don't count spring break. But when Governor Kemp announced that schools would be closed until April 24th, a lot of districts decided, okay, now we're moving into a long-term closure. So why do I bring this up? Your school may have been canceled, nothing provided to any students in terms of required instruction, could have all been voluntary and helpful for 10 days, sometime between March 14th and March 30th, right? And then if we can't count spring break. So you want to be very careful and clarify through an email, are we in a long-term closure now? Maybe you weren't receiving any required instruction and services in the month of March, but don't categorize yourself based on what happened in March, because that was confusing. And a lot of districts were not providing educational services to everyone. They were simply giving you busy work and kind of writing out the first 10 days, and then they're going to probably not provide anything over spring break, which is normal. But now that we're in a long-term closure and the clock starts ticking, an extended break, the United States Department of Education has said to schools, if you're in a long-term closure and you decide that you're going to stay closed, you don't have to provide any education for anyone. So general ed kids are not receiving daily classes, and that means special ed kiddos won't receive instruction. Again, you might receive helpful, voluntary ideas and activities, but if you can confirm after your spring break that school's not reopening, then you'll know, okay, then I should not be expecting that I have online live classes every day. I should not be expecting my OT and my speech pathologist to contact me and deliver live service. Now, what does this mean? A lot of parents are saying, well, Christy, if school is canceled, we've already been out 10 days, right? And now we're going to stay closed until April 24th. What's going to happen to all this missed time? Don't worry. The United States Department of Education has said compensatory instruction and services will be discussed once your building reopens. And the Georgia Department of Education has said children may need additional services at that time to make up any missed sessions. So, and then if you have annual IEP meetings that are coming due from March 14th to April 24th, if your child's annual meeting is supposed to have been held, that's fine. Those might be held telephonically or virtually during this time window, or the school may decide to just, arrange to have the meetings once the school buildings reopen. Don't worry if your IEP expires during this time window, it will continue, all right? And if you do have a virtual IEP meeting, just ask about getting a recording. So if they do it over Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Skype or any of the live streaming platforms, just ask about getting a recording, and please get one. It's important for you to have that for your own documentation moving forward. Okay, so this slide is just about schools that were canceled and that are not reopening, and please don't get confused. I sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but it is confusing when parents say, well, yeah, but they're emailing me links and they're emailing me information. And I say, yes, but you need to clarify for yourself by an email to whoever your case manager is, the special ed teacher. If the special ed teacher is not sure, a lot of teachers are confused. This is brand new. We're used to teaching in school buildings. We're a kind of state that doesn't get hit by hurricanes, and fortunately we've not had any fires. So natural disasters are not something that our school systems in Georgia are typically used to rolling with. So communication has been slow. There have been some hiccups and speed bumps. So I'm encouraging families, just communicate. And if you reach out to someone who says, I don't know, just simply go to the person above them. At some level in administration, they will know how to answer the question, are we canceled and not doing instruction until we go back, right, into the building? Or are we open and is school in business? Are we open and rolling ahead? Okay, and that's this next slide. Are educational services being provided to all kiddos? And once you've confirmed that, then you will know, oh, okay, the school is responsible for free appropriate public education for my IEP student. And what the Georgia Department of Education has said, last week they sent out a memo to all of the superintendents and special ed directors. And they said school systems should be communicating with parents regarding their IEP services, okay? So you should be getting some information. What I'd love to encourage you to do once a week, maybe put it on your calendar so you'll remember. I'd like you to check 3 websites. The first is go to or three items on your online. The first is check the Georgia Department of Education website. Go to the special ed page, right? The special education page is buried within all of the other services that the Georgia DOE offers. So you'll have to search around till you find it. It's called Office of, I think, Special Education or Exceptional Student Services. But find that, look at it, give yourself a couple of minutes to navigate it, but click on anything that has to do with COVID-19. Because if you can see any new updates there, that's helpful. The second place I'd love you to go every week is to your school district website. Now, typically when you log on to your school district website, you type in the URL, there's a little pop-up box that the school websites have been programmed with that tell you about any frequent updates, right? And sometimes those change day to day. And there will be a little box there that you can click that says, okay, got it, right? Like, I get it, I understand. Or it'll be a box that says, tell me more. Click that, and that's going to take you into a whole new section of the website that the developers have put together strictly on COVID-19. And I got to tell you, some of those are impressive. I was taking a look at what DeKalb had put together, and DeKalb is putting out updates just about every couple of days, letting IEP parents know this is what we're doing, this is how we're communicating with you, here's some resources, here's what we're going to do moving forward, okay? So be sure that you log in at least once a week and check out what your school district is trying to communicate with you guys about IEP services during school closures. All right, third thing to check every week, and you guys may do this more frequently, but at least once a week, check your emails, because your teachers or the department might be emailing you about important changes, new resources, how to set up services, new office hours, new instructional opportunities, and your therapists might be trying to communicate with you about lining up teletherapy. So they might want to do your speech services or your occupational services through Zoom or FaceTime. So be sure you're checking at least once a week. Now that we're getting past the long-term point in time, I recommend that you check your emails once a day, at least first thing in the morning. Just quickly glance. If you have Gmail, the Google email provided through Gmail, what you want to do is be sure that you check a tab. There's the main email box and then there's promotions. Make sure you click on, there's the main, the promotions, and the social. Click all three just to make sure that those emails aren't automatically being filtered into your spam folder or your junk folder. A lot of parents are finding that when there are mass emails coming from an agency, that Gmail or and even other email systems get a little quirky and think that it's junk mail. So they're just going to quarantine it and put it immediately into a junk folder. So be sure you check those too, just so you don't miss anything important. Okay, enough technology, but that's the communication piece of this that's so important, because what we're finding is that schools are rolling with the punches. They're trying to figure out as we go what to do, and things may change a couple times in even 1 week, especially if we stay closed until the end of May, and we don't know that yet. But you're going to find that things start to work more seamlessly and more smoothly, but it's all being communicated to you by email and also on your school district's website. Okay, next point I want to make is that this is what's going to happen while we are trying to finagle what education looks like while we're at home. The Georgia Department of Education has said school systems and schools are going to work to ensure that the services that are given to all students, right, are provided to the most appropriate extent possible. Now, this obviously takes into account we have children with all kinds of needs. We have vision impaired, we have hearing impaired, we have children along the whole spectrum of autism, Down syndrome, learning disabilities, right? We have our medically fragile kiddos. We have children who have reading disabilities, may have a math disability, writing. The list of the 13 eligibility categories just scratches the surface of all of our range of incredible kids who are trying to learn in a whole new way that really wasn't designed to look that way when we sat down and did the IEP in a regular building. So there's a lot of leeway with what looks like the most appropriate extent possible. We're doing the best we can because we can't have, interaction face to face. So this is what the Georgia DOE says, and I underlined it for you here. Special ed instruction or related services may need to be adjusted, but IEP teams should work to ensure that a student receives services that are comparable to all students. So if you're in a district where teachers are really confused about what they should be doing, they're not used to online learning, give them some grace. They're learning. Like for instance, I think yesterday or today was a teacher learning day for many school districts. And so they're learning all day long how to access new technology to put things online. So they're going to adjust here and there what that instruction looks like. They're going to communicate with you once they're up to speed and they know what they're supposed to be doing, and we'll talk more about this in a minute. We may adjust what your child's education looks like during this time period. We may take it down 3 notches. We may switch to a different kind of presentation. Our speech may look a little different. Our OT may take on a different tenor, but they should be working to ensure that your student receives services that are comparable to everyone. And that's going to be tricky, right? For special ed kiddos, we're going to have to think outside the box and be super creative. That's what schools are training their IEP teams to do. And you have, every right in the world to say, can you tell me how we're going to morph this? How are we going to be creative with it? How are we doing, what we can to the most appropriate extent possible? All right. Now, question that I get a lot is, what should these services consist of during school closures? And I tell people there is not a single right way to do this, right? Because every child is different. So it could look like any of these things. So here are just some options that I listed. It could be learning packets from a teacher or materials downloaded by you. It could be online learning. It could be pre-recorded information, or it could be online learning through live stream education or live stream therapies. It could be FaceTime, Zoom, it could be telephone calls, right? It could be real time. It could also be TV educational programs. So Georgia Public Broadcasting is now providing education online, through the TV. And so it could be that you have your child watch a particular program on GPB, from 8 to 9 in the morning. And so and then might do a little worksheet on that, or might have some other type of activity where you might ask them questions, or right after they watch the TV show, the educational program, you may FaceTime with your teacher or log in and then do some live stream education where the teacher talks about what did we just watch, what was the point of this, answering questions, who, what, when, where, why, how. So it sometimes looks like a lot of different things patchworked together. And it also might look like some other type of learning that is adapted to your child's needs and location. So it could be specific to your child's situation, but this is not a one-size-fits-all. There's not a single right way to do this. So if your child, when school is open, is in a self-contained classroom, for instance, your teacher may do things very differently than a teacher who has children in a resource setting. And she's trying to figure out how to meet all of the children's different needs. And so we'll talk in a minute about how to really get specific to make sure that we feel like what's happening while we're at home is useful. All right. Now, again, I want to remind you, there is going to be some missed instruction. There will be missed therapies. And after an extended closure, usually 10 days or more, again, don't count spring break, schools are going to consider how that closure impacted everything. And if children need any additional education or therapy to make up for that missed work. So I'm just assuring parents, don't panic. Your child will get caught up. And it might be done on a school-wide basis, or it could be done on an individual basis. And we'll know more about this when our schools reopen, and we'll be communicating with the case manager and the special ed director at that time. It's hard to guess right now what that would look like because we don't know exactly what the impact is. We don't know how long we're going to be out. And again, it's, like a thumbprint. Every child is different. So we'll gauge, and this is why keeping track of regression is important. Remember, your teachers had a good idea of where your child was on all of their academic work and their goals and objectives right before school closed. And so we'll measure that again when we go back into the buildings, and we'll see, did we backward slide? Did we regress? Did we forget what we knew, right, from January to March? That's a possibility. Or did we not really make much progress, where we're just kind of inchworming along from March, to May, or whenever we go back to school? And so that will be taken into account. And my hunch is that you're going to see a lot of makeup work being delivered, both on a school-wide basis for all children, and then also on an individual basis for your child. They'll try to make it meaningful. We don't want your child to return to school and have, an 18-hour school day. So we'll have to do some creative solutions. But don't worry, because makeup work for all of this missed time, now that we've really slowed down, it will be there, and it will be there for your child, all children, but particularly special ed kids. Okay. What about IEP meetings while we are closed? Well, what the Georgia Department of Education has said is that you can have your annual meetings or your eligibility reviews. Remember, eligibility reviews are every 3 years, unless you happen to get a new diagnosis within that 3 years time frame. And then you can ask the team to have an eligibility meeting to consider a new diagnosis. But your one-time-a-year annual IEP meeting or any eligibility reviews can be held through, telephone or, live virtual meetings, or you can just arrange to have them as soon as the buildings reopen. So different districts are doing different things, but remember, if your IEP expires while we're under a school closure, it's going to continue. The services aren't going to stop. They'll continue past those deadlines. Some districts are trying to hold those meetings telephonically or virtually. And so if your IEP is going to expire and your district's open to having the meeting online or through the telephone, please do two things for me. One is ask for a copy of the most recent progress report, not your academic progress report. I mean, you can certainly ask for that if you want it, but the thing that I'm looking for is your IEP progress report, because that's going to tell you where your child was on their goals and objectives. The most recent one should have come out in January or February, and you might already have one, but if you don't, ask for a copy of that. And ask for a draft copy of the IEP that you're going to be looking at, because I want you to have something to look at during the meeting. Otherwise, you're looking at a bunch of faces on the screen, and they may screen share with you and show you the IEP, but I'd like you to have a hard copy at home. So, and again, ask about a recording of the meeting, because typically if you were to go into an IEP meeting in a school building, many parents like to record that with their smartphone or a digital voice recorder. It's important that you have a recording so that you can remember what was talked about, remember the decisions that were made. We are all feeling upside down and topsy-turvy, and we want to make sure that a recording is there so whoever's typing up the decisions in the IEP has something to go back to and listen to in case something was dropped or forgotten. And I'd love for you to have one too for your own records. Okay. Things are going to look different in your IEP for this closure time period versus what your IEP will look like once we're back in the building. So your back in the building IEP may look different, and you probably will have an IEP meeting when you go back into the building if the two IEPs look really different, because it's hard to pretend when you're creating an IEP during the closure, during these school closures, what things will look like when you get back into school for a number of different reasons. We can act like we're creating an IEP for a regular school day in a school building, but there may be a time period we may have to delineate and separate portions of the IEP out to say, this is what we're doing during school closures, this is what we're doing when we're back in the building. It just depends on how significant the change is for your kiddo. So during the IEP meeting, ask a lot of questions like, okay guys, I know we're developing this as if we're going to school business as usual, but are we going to also talk about and create a separate section maybe in the meeting minutes or in the IEP services that talks about a modification, because we're at home, we can't do everything the same. So be sure to ask about that. And again, there's no right way or wrong way to do this. The most important thing is that you just have a clear written document that tells you exactly what's happening. All right, day-to-day realities. If only it looked like we were all happily clicking away on our keyboards with this little cartoon in the top right-hand corner. That is really not the day-to-day reality. Teachers are not used to online teaching. Children generally are not used to online learning. We're used to playing, right, or entertaining ourselves most of the time online. And so learning online and learning from home even, it's really, it can be very stressful. So just take every day as it comes. If you're sailing through this, that's absolutely phenomenal. If you're struggling, just know you are not alone. So here are my tips. First, look at your child's IEP. Pull that IEP out or ask for a copy to be sent to you, emailed to you from the school district. Look and see, what are the goals? This might be the first time that some of you are actually looking at the goals because we've taken a lot for granted. But then ask, what was my child able to do when school actually ended, when it closed? That's your IEP progress report. Ask therapists and the teacher to give you the numbers, right? The statistics or the number of trials. Was it 2 out of 5 times on a goal? Was it 80% on a goal at the time that they left off with the building teaching, right before school closed, right? Or you can find that information in the most recent IEP progress report. So you really want to know, well, where were we right before school closed? Like, what was my child able to do? Now, I want to tell you, when you try to do that same work at home with your child, if you're going to tackle that, you're not probably going to get the same results that your teacher did, because they're trained, they're professionals. But it's just a good idea for you to know, oh, well, he really was able to do this 3 out of 5 times, or he really wasn't able to do this very much. And it might surprise you, because then you would say, okay, well then I know that I can, push a little bit harder on this, or you'll know not to be disappointed when you're not seeing your child do the same thing for you at home. It just kind of gives you an idea of where we were right before school left off. Remember, in an environment that was professional with certified experts. Don't compare yourself and your child's performance at home to anything like that, but just do this for general info. Okay. Other question is, just ask the teacher, what's the curriculum that you're giving my child? Because remember, special ed students have really two programs. They have the general ed curriculum that they have to be exposed to, and sometimes that's adapted and modified. And they also have their IEP goals that they're being taught to master. So ask questions for that big picture view, because sometimes parents will pull the IEP and say, well, I'm looking at the goals, right? But why did you send home this worksheet that looks like it's, 5 levels above where my child is? Well, why are we reading, a unit chapter on, this material that my child clearly cannot grasp right now? That's because that's the general ed curriculum, right? If it is too advanced, ask questions for that big picture view, and I'm going to teach you in a minute about really how to communicate with your teacher and say, okay, this is way above our heads. We need more modifications or more adapted materials, or we need to bring this to a level that my child can understand. Conversely, if it's not challenging enough, if your kiddo's speeding ahead, same thing, you can ask for more challenging work. These are the things that teachers would be doing normally in the classroom. So your teacher's not with your child every day looking to see what's hard, what's easy, what's middle of the road. They're going to rely on you to tell them, well, this was super challenging. We could not do a single bit of this, or we struggled during this, or, my child was tantruming, or this was too easy, right? My child is bored, or this was just right. So your teacher's going to rely on you to give some feedback about how are we doing on the goals, how are we doing on the material that's being presented, because they're not the eyes and ears right now in your classroom, which is at home. So when you're talking with teachers and therapists, the first thing I would say is, as we move into long-term, an extended closure, requested that you have a discussion with your teachers and your therapists. That can be an IEP meeting if you need it to be, but sometimes it's just a discussion. Hey, here's what's going on. Here's what we're working on. Ask about data collection for IEP goals and objectives. Just ask them, what are we doing? Are you going to rely on me? How do I do this? Do you have a chart for me? Do you have a worksheet? Like, where do you want me to collect this data? Or are you going to do it? Okay. And then be honest, right, we talked about this, what's working at home and what's not working. And don't stress yourself. If it's not working, again, just communicate that, see what can be done, but don't knock yourself out, because, this is an unusual situation. You're not expected to be the expert. Keep a daily log of what you can work on, and different teachers will ask you for different things. So, and get yourself organized a little bit. Ask them for anything that's going to help you keep track of what works, any results or any modifications that you had to make. Some teachers are going to teach you to do one problem, take a break, all right? And really heavily reward your child for doing one problem. Your child is not used to seeing you in the role as a teacher, typically, for most families. And it can create a whole new level of stress and confusion when, and it can also cause your child to deteriorate in other areas if there's too much stress and pressure. So really communicate with your teachers and say, this is leading to problems like with normal day-to-day activities. Just be honest with them, and they'll help you figure out how much is too much. And I guarantee you most teachers and therapists understand and will give you a compassionate approach so that you don't feel like you're struggling through the whole day, even on things like getting up out of bed. I read a post the other day from a mom who said, trying to do math and reading and writing and all these other things, now my child won't even comply with getting dressed. And it's hard to know if that's the direct result of mom being the teacher, or if it's just the result of, this is strange that we're all at home, that we don't have a schedule, we're not getting up and going places. You never really know, and children with disabilities have different perspectives on the importance of, or families with disabilities have different perspectives on the importance of a schedule and a routine. But the more you communicate with the teachers and therapists, the better. Okay, so let's talk about technology. I get a lot of questions about this, and remember, if we were in a short-term closure before in your school district for the first 10 days, don't count spring break, and now we're in a long-term closure. If your school district is open for education, remember, not voluntary, but mandatory. If your school district is providing education to you and it's education that's being counted, your teachers are teaching, you're being given work and expected to do it and turn it back in. Your therapists are logging on and giving teleservices, or sometime this week or next week, they'll start that. If technology, any type of device, whether it's an iPad, a Chromebook, a laptop, if it's being given to all students in the district, then it must be given to special ed kiddos. This is called equity, and this is a big deal right now because there are districts that are only delivering learning through online platforms, right? They have their software, they have their programs they're loading, and there was a district out in Washington that handed out 4,000 Chromebooks to everybody who didn't have one. And the important thing was they were trying to be equitable, they were trying to be fair, but guess what? Then they realized there were students who simply could not use those devices. So the next question is, will it actually work? And here's some pointers for you if your student simply cannot use the device. If your child is not paying attention or tantruming or resisting looking at a device, and guys, if your school district is delivering instruction that is required, not just busy work, voluntary, or optional. Remember, there's a difference between schools cancel, but your teachers might be providing some helpful information in case you want to do anything, versus school is open, we are in session, here's the classes that are being taught, here's the material that you should be using. If there's a device associated with that learning and your child is struggling, first ask your teachers for pointers and a lesson on how you should do it. How should you use the device? How should you approach the lesson? You may have to ask your teacher or your therapist to come online briefly with you, maybe every day, maybe every other day. Just brainstorm with them. For instance, maybe they can live stream for a few minutes a day with your kiddo to encourage them as a motivator, right? Maybe they log on for like 3 or 4 minutes first thing in the morning and they say, hey, Christy, we're going to have a great day today. This is what we're going to do, right? We're going to do one lesson online, and then this afternoon you're going to see, Mr. Darden for your speech pathology, right? For your speech, right? Sometimes kiddos, when they see their teacher as a motivator, can be helpful. Again, this is all new territory, and your teacher may not have the time or the ability to do that, so you'll have to seek creative solutions. And if you need a lesson in how to approach this, there are teachers who are telling parents, don't try to do the whole lesson, just do 10 minutes of it and then take a brain break, right? Maybe walk around the house or go out in the driveway and then come back and do the next 10 minutes, right? Or the teacher may say, if I give you 5 days of work, let's see if we can do 2, or let's really slow the train down. So again, don't stress. And if you've tried some pointers, if you've tried the brain breaks, if you've tried some creative solutions and it's still not working, tell the teacher, keep track, need to try it for a little while, and ask them to just give you some low-tech alternatives. Low tech means that we may not be logging on for that. We may be looking at it as a worksheet or a book, and you may need those daily or weekly, or you may just need a combination. Maybe your child can attend to a lesson for 5 minutes and then attention is shot, that's fine. The rest of the lesson might come through a book or through a worksheet. So don't be afraid to blend your low tech with your high tech alternatives. But again, you've got to communicate that with your teachers. So reasonable expectations, I sort of hinted at this a minute ago. It might take you 2, 3, or 4 times longer than you would prefer to either get that work started or get it completed. So, and we're talking about maybe 2 hours longer, 2 days longer. It might take you 2 weeks longer, 3 weeks longer, 4 weeks longer than what we would prefer to see our children being able to do. It can be very frustrating, but this just is not the time to stress because, as we've said, we know, there are exceptions, obviously, to you guys who are listening, but most of us are not, a certified special ed teacher, speech therapist, OT, RBT, or any other type of specialist. So just ask your teacher and your therapist for reasonable expectations. What would be reasonable? Because see, they're used to working with your child and speeding up, slowing down, keeping the same pace. They're constantly flexible in their classrooms. And now you're the eyes and ears in the classroom, but you're not going to have the same materials, the same level of expertise. You've got other things to do, right? We all have laundry and cooking and other children and a lot of other things to do. So ask what's reasonable and don't overwork, right? You want to keep yourself happy and healthy. And ask, speech language. What are some fun ways to work on goals? If you need audiology services, interpreting services, do you need them? Ask for them in writing and keep following up. Again, all new territory for schools who are scrambling to try to figure out how do we make this work now that we're in, virtual reality here. Physical and occupational therapist. Ask them, what can I reasonably do at home? Maybe it looks like some wall push-ups. Maybe instead of handwriting and having tears or frustration, there's some other fun things that we can do at home. Maybe, we look at day-to-day daily living activities that are fun, right? You can incorporate, activities like baking or cooking or even, laundry. I mean, it doesn't seem fun, but at the same time, you can make a game out of it, right, out of typical household chores. And if you ask your therapists and your teachers, how can I convert this everyday thing that I've got to be doing anyway to help my child, right, with an academic goal or a speech goal or a communication goal? What can I reasonably do at home? And the last thing that I'm talking with parents a lot about is therapeutic recreation. Basically, that's therapeutic fun. So ask the teachers and the OT and the SLP, what's some fun recreational activities that also are therapeutic, right? It's kind of like you're sneaking the therapy into the recreational activities. What can we do at home? Remember, they know your child really, really well, and they know all the tips and tricks and tools. And so they'll brainstorm with you, and it might be that you go to some creative solutions instead of, the rote things that we think of when we think of therapies, okay? So you are on the job if you are trying to help your child learn at home. And if your school district is open and instruction is being delivered, great. But ask for help. You might need to ask them to show you in a short video demo exactly how they do it, a certain skill or a certain task that might use Zoom. They might send you a phone video. Again, don't be alarmed if they tell you not to worry about it, because we're just looking at the basic level here. We're not really gunning for overachievement. Compensatory services, makeup services are going to be provided once we're back into normal school mode. Some teachers have suggested that maybe they can sit in virtually or take a look at you, sending them a video, take a look at that to see what you're doing, and they might be able to give you some pointers. If you feel like going this extra distance, if that's additional on-the-job help that is just going to stress you more, please don't worry about it. Again, this is for parents who feel like, yeah, I think I might be able to nail this, but I'd like to see the teacher do it, or I want her to see how I'm doing it. And she might say, well, here's a different way to do double-digit addition, or here's a different way to do hand over hand with handwriting, right? Or here's a different way to do these speech exercises. So You can ask for a little bit of on-the-job training if you feel like you're up to it and if they can do it. All right, what do we do if your child is regressing and or doing no work at all? It's okay, just put your concerns in writing, just email and say, here's what's happening. I'm able to do A, B, C, D. I can't do, these other things, right? Tell them what you can do. And remember, you've been communicating all along. Tell them what you can't do. You can CC, you can copy the special ed coordinator or the director. Sometimes they can leap in and give additional suggestions. You might be super frustrated and exhausted, and we're all living in these uncertain times. So it's tempting to want to blame. Believe me, we are all feeling stressed, but we want to be, whenever you put anything in writing, just be professional and courteous. Explain the facts. Ask for help, ask for what you need or what you think you need, and then just follow up on that email every couple days. Remember that our school folks are inundated right now. They're just swimming in emails, swimming in technology. They are trying to individualize programs. Instead of teaching 10 at a time, now they're trying to figure out how to customize this for children in all different scenarios. So you might have to follow up on your email every couple days. And again, do not stress. I emphasize this a couple times. If your child is regressing or not doing any work, just communicate. And remember, we'll have the makeup services. It's better for you guys to be happy and healthy than you pulling your hair out. And if it's upsetting your child, this is not a time when you are responsible for being the teacher, the SLP, the OT. So I just want to thank you for tuning in today. A reality check. This is a strange time. You're juggling a lot. You have a new schedule. Helping your child takes a lot of work every day. Just be aware, where am I on bandwidth? How much time do I have today? How much mental energy? How much emotional energy? Really tune in first, right when you get out of bed. Where am I today? And remember, this may change between 8 a.m. and 12, between 12 noon and 3 p.m. Having that self-awareness of where you are during the day. Don't strive for perfection. You are the hub. You're the glue that keeps us all together. So just make sure you are grounded. If you're exhausted on a Tuesday because you didn't sleep well the night before, maybe that Tuesday is just a play day, a fun day. Maybe it's a vacation day. Maybe you only go to school Mondays and Wednesdays. Maybe you go to school half a day with your children. Maybe you work an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. There's a learning curve here, and take on what you feel like you can handle, but you're just not expected to be the expert. And don't get overwhelmed when you see a lot of links coming to you, a lot of material. And if you're communicating back with the teacher and saying, I know you want us to do this, but here's realistically what we can do or what we did this week. If you want to send them an email every Friday and say, here's how far we got, that's going to help your teacher know, oh, I need to adjust this downward, or we need to adjust it upward, right? But the most important thing is just to try to take care of yourself, because in that situation, okay, this is temporary. We're going to be okay. And if you need to get in touch with me, here's 3 ways to do it. You can go to my website and find out more information about me and my services. You can email me with any questions that you have. If you'd rather talk to me, you're welcome to schedule. I have an online scheduler, and I offer complimentary 20-minute phone consults, so you're welcome to sign up for those as well. So those are the 3 ways that you're able to get hold of me. So that's the end of my presentation, and if we have any questions, Brian's going to either read those to me or let me see those. So Brian, do I stop screen sharing now?
If you'd like to.
Okay.
I can put you back up on the screen.
Great.
And then are you able to see these questions as they come through?
I'm not. I see me in the bottom right-hand corner, and I see your initials, but I don't see you. I don't see the questions.
Okay, I can just read them out to you then.
Okay.
So Christina asked, This was a while ago towards the start of your presentation. You may have answered it. What if they don't return this year?
Right, absolutely. So if we don't return this year, we'll definitely be in what's called the long-term, extended closure. And most school districts, I'm finding, if they have the capacity, are going to move to some type of formal distance learning. So the most important thing now is most of us have gone through the first 10 days of the short-term closure. Now, you might have had spring break in there sometime. Spring break is at different times for different school districts, but go to your calendars, check to see what was the last day of school before we went out for the virus, count it up, email, and just find out, okay, are we officially in a long-term closure, and how are we going to do learning moving forward? Some districts might tell you, guys, we're not returning to school. Here's some voluntary, helpful, optional information you can use, but we're going to plan to make everything else up when we go back into the buildings. Other districts are deciding, nope, we're going to keep going with school, but it's going to look really different. It's going to look like online, or worksheets or packets. So you want to make sure you know what bucket you're in, what your school district has selected, and that'll help you with your expectations about what you need to be doing.
Okay, perfect. Allison asked, and you may have answered this already, but if you could just reiterate, if your school is implementing long-term closure activities and set up virtual learning for your child, is there a certain number of instructional hours required per week or day?
Okay. So is the question, can you read me the question one more time? Was there a question about if we're implementing long-term closure distance learning instead of virtual learning?
Well, no, it's sort of mixed together. If your school is implementing long-term closure activities and set up virtual learning for your child, is there a number of instructional hours required per week or day?
Got it. Okay. And the answer to that is no. This is different than hospital homebound learning or home-based learning, where the state set a minimum of 3 hours of instruction for children. This is considered just regular school. There's not a minimum number of hours of instruction. It has to be to the most appropriate extent possible. But usually when we're talking about virtual learning, there will be a certain number of lessons given every day, especially if it's virtual. And then what I'm finding is that some schools have said that their teachers are available. They have office hours. So they'll tell you, here's your virtual learning for today. You might log on and watch some videos, or you might go to GPB, or you might log on and look at some worksheets. But then they'll tell you, our teachers are available 9 to 12 and 1 to 4, for instance, is just an example. If you'd like to make an appointment with your teacher for additional help or instruction, you can do that. Now, if your child is really struggling and you need more than a 15-minute appointment with your teacher, and you are going to have to probably communicate that. There's no minimum or maximum. It's all going to depend on what your child needs, and it's going to depend on your teacher's availability, because here's the other thing. If your school district has moved into distance learning and it's required and everybody's doing it, teachers are now having to work from home with their own kids, right? Sometimes nobody's there to watch their children, but they are required to be online teaching from 9 to 3, right? Or 9 to 2 or 8 to 12. So those office hours may have gone away in lieu of the direct instruction. If your teacher's Zooming or FaceTiming or Microsoft Teaming with the class, you may find that your teacher's not as accessible. But the most important thing is just to communicate and to say, what are the guidelines for my child given my child's IEP, and given the requirement that my child be exposed to the curriculum. And just remember that it's all in flux right now, so something has to give somewhere, and teachers like to help families figure out, well, where should we be focusing, right? Where should we be implementing most of our time and energy? And so again, this is just a conversation you have to have with your teacher. Some teachers, if all they do is teach self-contained all day and they don't have to give group lessons to resource or co-taught, some teachers are saying to their kiddos, I'm going to give you a direct lesson, an hour a day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Okay. And that sort of intense one-on-one usually is the equivalent of 3 hours, right, of group instruction, but it depends on if your child is actually going to benefit from that intense one-on-one. Okay, so I hope that answers the question.
Sorry, yes, I think so. And then just someone asked if they could get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. Is that an option? I could put that on our website.
Yeah,
Or
that's
okay.
great.
Okay, well, I will have that hosted on our website where we post the presentation. We'll have it posted on our main focus activities page and then in the archive page as well. And that's parents, that's in everybody's weekly email. We've got links to all those pages. So Christy, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. Is there anything else you wanted to get in before we hang up and end this thing?
Nope, it's been my pleasure today, and I'm just cheering for all the families who are, you know, addressing their children's educational needs at home. And again, just communicate with your teachers, and hopefully we'll be back to school sooner rather than later.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much, Christy. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you, guys. Take care.